Thank you. I'm not going to use this thing. It seems scary. All right, thanks everybody for coming. I appreciate it. This talk is the developer's guide to promoting your work. And unlike all of the other awesome talks at this conferences, which are going to teach you how to build better software and better websites, I'm going to talk about how do you take all of that work that you're doing and make some money off of it. That being either getting a better job, getting your next job, going into consulting, going into training, or starting your own piece of software. This talk, I'm going to talk about the last 10 years of my career and how I've stumbled and kind of made a bunch of mistakes and learned how to promote myself and how to build up my own career. It didn't come very easy. As a developer, I am inherently introverted, and my original kind of notion about talking to other people was that it was very scary, as I imagine it is for a lot of you. But pushing myself out there and learning this was the most transformative thing of my career. I know it's really hard, but you can do it, I promise. Why is this important to you? All of you right now, whether you realize it or not, are building a product of some kind. You're building you. You're building your career. You're building your personal brand to go off and get a promotion in your company or get that next job. Or maybe you're actually building like a more literal project, a more literal product. Maybe you're thinking about launching your own consultancy or building your own product or building your own app and launching it. Regardless of what you're doing, you should be thinking about how do you promote that once you're ready. There's a terrible fallacy that exists in the software community that so many people seem to think that great products sell themselves. That if only, like, once you launch your great idea, clearly it's going to be a winner and you're going to be the next billionaire. And this is so incredibly wrong. There are so many great products that have been superior that have passed into history without anybody having ever known about them. Your ability to promote and talk about your product is the critical factor behind succeeding. So the format of this talk is basically going to be 3 stories about me, 3 different phases of my career. I'm going to tell you about what I was doing, how I promoted myself, what I learned along the way, and how I succeeded in that role. It could also be 3 stories about how the hair has moved from the top of my head around to the bottom of my head. But my first story is about Todd the Consultant. So quite a few years ago, I worked for a company called Big Corp, which I imagine is a lot like companies that you might have worked for. Big Corp looked a little bit like this, which is very depressing. But it's not the cubicles themselves that are the depressing part. It's all of the things that go along with it. It's the yearly performance reviews. It's, you know, a meager annual increase in wages. It's doing the same project over and over and over again, always failing in the same way. And so I'd had enough of this, and I decided to break into consulting. So I went out and I bought a bunch of clip art of people shaking hands and high-fiving each other, and I was a consultant. But of course, the first problem you run into is how are you going to get people to give you some money? What are you going to do? Who are you going to consult for? What are you going to, how are you going to find your clients? And so the way I did that is through professional speaking. I started coming to conferences and user groups and companies like what I'm doing right now and talking about stuff that maybe I didn't always know it very well, but I wanted to know it. I wanted to be the expert on it, and so I would spend time researching it and presenting at conferences. Here's a clip of one of the first conferences I ever spoke at, which was Twin City Code Camp many years ago. This talk was awful. I'm not going to show it to you. It's technically out on YouTube if you really want to see how bad it was. It was basically me for an hour sitting behind a desk, staring at my computer, typing, occasionally like looking up nervously, like I should make eye contact back. I should make eye contact back. And it was quite terrible. But it got results. Through these early conference speaking, I landed my first few clients, and I was able to build my business. In fact, when I first started, I was so nervous that, like, I hope this is cool here. I don't know what the culture is. You know, I'm from Minnesota, and so maybe things are a little different down here. But my first few conference gigs, I would carry a little flask of bourbon. And maybe like 15, 20 minutes before I was about to go on stage, I'd be like, find a quiet corner or whatever, and I'd just take a couple pulls off of it, just to, calm the nerves. When you come up on stage, you don't want to be drunk, but you want to be a little happy to be here, right? And it totally helped. It totally helped. I don't do it anymore, but, well, I mean, I do, but not for nerves, just for fun. All right, so the great thing about speaking, doing this kind of technical speaking, is that it builds on itself. So you've all made the first step. You're all here. You're all engaging with other people in the community. And so the next step will be to take that and say, all right, well, what do you know? What do you want to be the expert in? What do you want to learn? What do you want to share with others? And bring that back to this conference next year, or bring it to a local user group, or bring it to another conference. There's tons of awesome user groups and conferences all over the US and all over the world. And the first few are going to be scary, but you'll get better. You're going to learn how to be more comfortable on stage, what's your own speaking style. There's some chairs up front if you want. You don't have to stand in the back. So you'll learn what's your own personal speaking style, and you'll become more comfortable with it. And it will build. As you get more comfortable, you will get better. You'll be able to communicate better. And speaking at a local user group will lead to invites to conferences, which will lead to invites to bigger conferences. And then once you climb this ladder, you can go back really easy. Once you've gone to a few big conferences, going back to your local user group is really easy. And you can build your own reputation and get invited to much cooler conferences like this one right here. Woo! All right, here is some questionable advice. Of all the conferences I've been to, the best, most valuable experiences I've ever had have always come at the after parties. They've always come from when we've kind of torn down the boundaries and we're having like real conversations about somebody's next idea or where they're gonna go. And so all of those best experiences have come from going to the after party, and when you reach that part where you're like socially drained and you just want to go back to your hotel or your house or wherever and like escape people, if you can just push through that for a little bit longer, that's when the magic happens. That's when you meet all kinds of amazing people that are going to set you up with your next opportunity. So why does all this matter? This is probably really hard, and you're probably looking at me like, that seems like the most uncomfortable thing in the world, and I don't want to do it. This matters because eventually you're going to go out and try and sell this product that you're building, be it you or your consultancy or your software product or your app or whatever you want to do. And when it comes time to do that, selling it to your friends is easier than selling it to strangers. Right now, we're all becoming friends. Probably not like BFFs forever friends, but friends in the term that like, you're looking at me, you're gonna recognize me and what I do. I'm looking at you, I'm gonna recognize you and what you do, and we'll probably chat more over the course of the conference and the after party. And when you go out and do your next thing, as a human being, we're more likely to support each other and be like, oh yeah, I met that lady at ThunderPlains last year. That's an awesome blog she just launched. I'm gonna like retweet it and share it with this other person. Or, oh, that guy just launched a software product. I'm gonna like try and sell it into my client. Like, that's a really good idea. We inherently want to support each other. And so when you come out and you engage in this sort of setting, you're building your own network and building friends, which is gonna make doing whatever it is you wanna do later a lot easier. So, because we're becoming friends, let me help you. We do things for our friends. So if you're on the fence about this, you're like, I kind of want to do it, but I don't know if this is a good idea, and I don't know what conference to submit it to. Let me help you. Send your topic, your idea, what you want to do, and email it to me. Take a picture of that so you remember, because I'm serious about this. Email it to me, and I'll take 10, 15 minutes, and I'll review your topic, and I'll give you some feedback on what I think, and I'm happy to do that for you. I'm just going to leave this here for a second in case anybody else wants to take a picture of that. Because I'm totally serious. This isn't like a weird joke. Like, I've responded to like probably 50 people on this. Okay, good. So that's the end of the first story. So after I had been a consultant for a few years, I started seeing similar patterns. I was writing a lot of JavaScript, and I was noticing that JavaScript breaks a lot. And every client I would go to, I'd have to build this little like logging tool that would figure out how my app was breaking in production and like get some information on how to fix it. And so after I'd built that like 4, 5, 6 times for different clients, finally beat into my head that, hey, I should start my own thing. And so this is a story about Todd the Entrepreneur. I went out and with a few friends of mine started a company called Track.js, which is a JavaScript error monitoring service. The idea behind this was originally stupidly that, hey, let's build this separate thing so we can sell it into our consulting clients. The scope of it being limited to, we just, added on to a consulting engagement. That was not a good idea. It turns out it had a much broader appeal. And so I'd worked on this for a couple of years, and it was a fun, like, evenings and weekend hacking project. I'd hang out with my friends, we'd go to the bar, we'd write some code. It was fun. But after 6 to 9 months, we'd had a lot of fun, but the business wasn't really growing. And so it became clear that in order for it as a business to succeed, my job stopped being about actually coding. I know that's the fun part, right? But at some point, when your piece of software reaches a reasonable level of done, your job isn't to add one more feature. Your job needs to become all of the other things that a business needs to do to succeed, like market and sell and evangelize, whatever that means, and support your customers and all of those sort of things. And I wasn't any of those things. That had never been my job, and I was totally lost. But it was pretty clear that that's what I needed to start doing. And so I'd been speaking at conferences for a while at that point, and I had a reasonable personal brand. There was a lot of people who knew who I was, but now I needed to create something that wasn't me. I needed to create an identity for this company that was independent of me. And so I didn't know how to go about doing that. I found this, which is probably my favorite online persona. His name is Fake GRIMLOCK. Has anybody heard of Fake GRIMLOCK on Twitter? One person. He's at Fake GRIMLOCK, and he is a giant robot dinosaur from outer space who's come to help you sell your software products. And he has a lot of really great stuff online. It's really amazing, and he has his own personality. And I don't know if anybody actually knows who he is, but he's very hush-hush about who he actually is. But I'm going to show you a quote from Fake GRIMLOCK, and I'm going to try and channel Fake GRIMLOCK because I couldn't read it as me. I have to read it as a giant robot dinosaur would read it. Most important step for build product is build product. Second most important step is build personality for product. No have personality? Product boring. No one wants. So in this rant, Fake GRIMLOCK defined the idea of minimum viable personality as what are the things you need to do to create a personality around this thing that you want to do. Just launching your blog, launching your software isn't enough. What is the identity you want to craft around it? And so the fundamental lesson is people probably need the software that you want to create, but they also need bread. Don't be bread. Be bacon. People love bacon. People crave bacon. They go after it. Bacon is defining. It's not always great for you, but it's awesome. But you want to be that. So how do you define your minimum viable personality? You have to answer a few questions. If you can answer these things, this is enough to start identifying your brand. First, how do you want to change the world? What is the thing that you want to do with your startup, with your app, with your open source package, with whatever you're doing? What do you want to fix? Have a really clear idea about what that is. Second, then what do you stand for? What is important? What is important to your identity for you to be up against, to root for? And third, what do you hate? And some people this rubs the wrong way, like, that's so negative, Todd. You can't hate things. You're not really for anything unless you are against something. Well, you have to stand up against whatever your opponent is in this thing that you're trying to do. So if you can define your mission, your values, and your enemy, that's enough. So how did I do that back for Track.js? So Track.js, what were we trying to do? Our goal from the very beginning was to build a better web. The thing that we were trying to fix in the world was there's a lot of really bad websites on the internet, and it's really infuriating when they have obvious errors on them and they just don't fix them and I can't do the thing I'm trying to do. And we're trying to build tools to help with that. What do we stand for? What do you stand for is another way of thinking of like, how do you want to differentiate yourself versus other things? And so what we wanted to stand for is simplicity. Like, we didn't want to be the most powerful tool that does everything under the sun. We wanted to be the most obvious way of solving one set of problems for people who might not understand how all the internals work. And what do we hate? Broken websites and bad errors, which feeds right into the other things. So this is how I took those 3 questions and applied it to my business. But you're going to get it wrong. With all things in starting and building a marketing kind of thing, it's going to be really hard for developers to do because it's not as objective. It's not like you have a test that's just going to pass one day and then you know you've got it right. It's all very fuzzy. And so you're going to have to iterate on this and get feedback on whether it's working. Are people responding to your message, to what you're doing? And it's going to be okay that you get it wrong. Just keep pushing forward. Once you know who you are, you need to start building an audience. So who do you want to talk to? Who do you want to sell your open source package to or get adopters for? Who do you want your audience for your blog to be? Whatever. And so when you're building an audience, you have to remember one important factor, that it's always about them. All of us are most interested in ourselves. And that's okay. Like, you don't have to feel guilty about it. All of us are most interested in ourselves, and so you have to remember that when you're talking to people. You can't start a conversation with your potential audience talking about you and what you want them to do. You have to build stuff for them. Be valuable for them so that they want to learn more from you because they're getting something out of it. So first, you have to discover who they are. Who do you want to be in your audience? Who do you think are likely adopters of your product? Once you have an idea, you go out and you create things for them. Build things that are just inherently valuable for them. Write blog posts, give tutorials, build online video walkthroughs, build template projects, participate actively on online forums where they are. Build things that are inherently useful for your audience because you have to give them things first for them to be interested in you. And then once you have those things, you got to go talk to them. Go to where they are. Like, they're not going to come to you. They're not going to come in search of you. The people who you want in your audience already have a community somewhere. They are already on Stack Overflow or in these GitHub groups or on that Slack channel or at this user group. Go and talk to them and bring the things that you've built and give them to them. And so an example of how I'm doing that with Track.js is this right now. So meta, right? I've identified my audience as developers who work in the web. And I'm coming here to talk and give you something that I think is valuable for you, like some tips on how to promote yourself and be more successful in your own endeavors. And I'm coming here to where I think you're going to be, which is ThunderPlains in Oklahoma City. And I'm doing all that as part of building the audience of Track.js. I'm also giving you something as part of it. So it's a weird like inception thing right now. And iterate. So there have been plenty of times when I've been totally wrong. And I've thought a particular group of people were really going to be interested in something I built. And I was totally wrong. And they were not interested at all. And you're going to be wrong too. And that is okay. Okay, so once you have your identity and you have an audience and you've built some things for them, you might get lucky enough that you have an opportunity to pitch your idea to your audience. So you have everything together and now you're in the room and somebody's interested in what you do and now you have 2 minutes to tell them everything they need to know about what you want to do. And so you have to do a few things. One, tell me, what do you do? Second, how am I better for it? This is a really important step that a lot of people miss when they're like trying their pitches out on me, is they don't tell me, what am I going to get out of this? How am I a better person for having used this piece of software or subscribed to your blog? And then third, what's the next step? If you've been successful at explaining the first two, they're going to want to take the next step, and so give them a clear path to do it. The hard part about this, and the part that we're all going to be super scared of before you walk up and give your pitch, is that you're going to get rejected. And you are, a lot. A lot of times, people in the Midwest tend to be very polite, and you'll do your pitch, and they won't like walk away, or they won't say they're not interested. They'll just give you kind of a glazed eye approach. Like they're too polite to like say they're not interested, so they'll listen for the 2 minutes, and then they'll move on. But you still know, right? You still know when you're talking to somebody who's glazed over. So it's okay to get rejected. You're learning something. You're learning when your pitch gets rejected that either your pitch is wrong, or the audience was wrong, or your identity was wrong. You're learning that some part of your setup is wrong. Either you're pitching the wrong thing, or to the wrong person, or in the wrong way. So it's okay. Rejection is just going to help you iterate and figure out how to fix things. I'm going to show you an early version of my pitch. So here's an early pitch I would do for Track.js, and I had a gimmick with this. But I've given this in a number of different places around the world, and so I'm going to show this to you now.
Hey, I'm Todd from Track.js. This is my business card demo that describes what makes Track.js awesome. So this is a JavaScript error, right? E is undefined, scripts.js, line 1. It's terrible. JavaScript has not been good about giving us good error information. And it sucks if this is all you have to go with to fix a customer problem. But the first thing is knowing that it happened. Because these errors, they don't happen in your servers where you have great logging tools. No, they happen in your users' browsers, and probably crappy ones like IE9. So the first thing Track.js does for you is let you know that it happened. And we tell you interesting statistics, like 80% of your customers who are on IE9 are running into this particular error on a URL. But that's just a start, because I don't know where to begin debugging E is undefined. So Track.js is listening to events that happened before the error to give you better context. Track.js polyfills and records console and makes it safe to use in all browsers. The console allows you to log on your client-side app like you log on your server and record interesting events and state changes in your application. In this case, we know that when the user first loaded the page, your application started initializing the user form. A few seconds later, your customer began interacting with your app and entered 16 email characters into this input. Track.js records interesting metadata about these user actions, but we never record the actual values to protect user privacy. After entering the email, the customer clicked on this button, and this AJAX event began, going to /API/users. It lasted 3,500 milliseconds before coming back with a 500. And that was the last thing that happened before this error occurred, which indicates the error probably has something to do with handling the response. We package all this information up with other interesting context about the browser and application for your developers. And with it, they can reproduce the exact series of events that led a customer to a problem and fix it quick. So that's Track.js. We're protecting 1 trillion pages a month and making the web a better place. I'd love to help you too. Check us out at trackjs.com.
Okay, so did you see the 3 things? What do? I give you information about errors. How are you better for it? I give you all the information to recreate it. And then third, what's your next step? Here's the business card. These are the cards. Like, we took an early version of our... Sorry. Forgot that we were recording. So here was our elevator pitch and how we covered the 3 things. So first, what do? We record your errors. Second, how do we make you better for it? You get all of the information so that you can recreate them quick. And third, what's the next step? I hand you my business card. These were made with these right here. We carved up an earlier version of what our UI looked like to tell a little story. And we printed these with a service called MooCards. MooCards lets you like print a different picture on the back side of every card. And most people just put like creative quotes or pictures of scenery or stuff like that. But you could also use it to tell interesting tech stories, which is actually a really captivating thing. People have told me a lot that the thing that they remembered about this pitch was like this unique thing. Like that's the only reason they remembered it, is they, came away from a conference and pulled one of my cards out of their pocket and they're like, oh yeah, that was awesome. I got a whole pitch at the bar. Because I tended to do this at the bar on the back of my hand, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, so for most of us, the next step that we're going to ask our potential audience to take is to come and visit your page. Most of us, the kind of things that we're going to build, we're going to have a web page as part of the thing that we're trying to sell. And so I want to talk briefly about page design. And by that, I don't mean like the CSS and layout and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, what do you need to do with a page so that people give you money? So each page should do basically two things. First, you should know who that page is talking to. So when somebody lands on your page, who are they? Are they a current customer, a former customer, somebody you'd like to be a customer, your next employer? Who are they? Define explicitly who do you think they are. And then second, what is your goal for that person on your page? That should be very obvious. Don't confuse them with like having a page that targets investors and media and partners and customers and everything all at once. Build a page that is for somebody to get them to do something. So I want to use another example from Track.js, because this whole section is just about examples of how I did this. Here is my email. No, just kidding. Here is the current homepage of trackjs.com. Now this, the audience for this page are potential customers. So I want somebody who is not currently a customer, but I hope to be a customer to land on this page. And what do you think my goal of this page is? To start a free trial. It's a great big red button above the fold, first thing they look at. And it's over these pictures of these developers looking at a piece of code and being like, oh my God, what do we do? This is bad, this is bad. And this is just a piece of stock photo. But I'm just gonna show this off for a second because I'm really proud of it. This is a stock photo of developers staring at a screen. And I made it into a photo of JavaScript developers staring on the screen. I photoshopped in that laptop sticker right there, and you didn't even notice. And I'm gonna prove it because I have another page where there are Angular developers. All right, so this page is all about trying to get my potential user to click on that button. That's what I want them to do. So I have a vague thing with some pictures on the front, but that's probably not enough to convince them. So they keep looking, and I try and tell things about, all right, how am I going to make you better, is what I want to phrase it. Is I don't want to talk about features and stuff right away. I want to talk about what are you going to be able to do after you click on that button. You're going to be able to do these things. And then I talk about features and what we actually do. And then a lot of people aren't objectively looking for certain things to do, and they want more social proof. And so we look at, hey, let's show off, other people who use us, prove that we're not just like a crappy, thing in a garage with some people working on it. Prove that like there's real people using us. And then I try and get them to click on that button again. And then at the bottom, as another piece of social proof, I say, hey, here's all of the different people we've protected as part of this. But my audience are developers. And a developer is going to look at that number, that ticker, and be like, Todd, that's bullshit. That is so bullshit. I'm going to prove to you that that's bullshit. I'm going to pop over my dev tools. I'm going to figure out how you're doing that. I'm going to send you a nasty email saying that that's bullshit. And they're going to find this right here, which is a note I left for the developer that says, hey there, developer. As I'm sure you'd understand, it would not be performant of us to get a precise session count every time a random user from the internet lands on our web page. This is based off a calculation. If you want to know what it is, email us at hello@trackjs.com. And I get at least one email a month of somebody emailing me being like, Todd, that was awesome. I totally thought that was bullshit, and I'm glad you left me a note. So in this way, I've made the markup of Track.js part of the overall message, because my audience are web developers, and they're all going to know how to do this. Okay. Again, iterate. It's going to be wrong. This is the 4th incarnation of our website. We're actually working on a new one right now, but the new one's still going to have that performance counter, that ticker counter on it. But we're changing a bunch of other things on it. And so it's going to be wrong. That's okay. Don't beat yourself up about it. But something specific that a lot of developers, web developers, get into the problem of is overdoing it. You're all familiar with all kinds of amazing technologies to build websites. And it's going to be very tempting to not do the really hard, painful work about figuring out marketing and audiences. And it's going to be really tempting to do the cool work of using the next JavaScript framework or optimizing another 10 milliseconds off of your load time. But it's a waste of time. Once your page is good enough, you need to keep going. Don't waste your time like shaving off every single possible new technology into this page. The point of this page is to communicate what you want to do to an audience and see and learn from it, to learn whether or not your product is the right product for the right audience. Polishing the performance or writing a new piece of blog software to launch your blog is probably not the most productive use of your time. Okay, I have one more story to tell you. And it's 11:30, so I'm right on time. So this is a story about Todd the Producer. So through some of my relationships with conferences, I started to feel like there was a gap, a need for speakers who just wanted to like compete on the art of speaking. They didn't like, you can't compare somebody who talks about .NET versus somebody who talks about security testing. Like, they're just two different topics that are too far apart to like compare who did a better job. So what we wanted to do is create a forum for these speakers to basically just show off and tell jokes and have a good time. A place for everyone to come together after the conference and have some beers, relax. And so I started this thing called PubConf. Has anybody heard of PubConf? Has anybody come to PubConf before? Yeah! Which one do you go to, KCDC? Yes. So PubConf, we run after a few conferences. It's always held after a main conference. And we pulled together about 10 of the most entertaining speakers that we can find to do 5-minute funny talks in a bar. And the audience picks who they think the most funny are, and they go on to compete and do more games and stuff like that. It's basically a comedy show for developers. There's a couple of events coming up if you're interested. There's one in London. If anybody's going to London, but probably not, but there's one in London in January. There'll be one in St. Paul in May, and then there'll probably be another one in KCDC in, what's that, end of July, beginning of August-ish. But I want to tell you a little bit about PubConf. The idea behind it, you know, so many companies have their conference. Like, Microsoft has Build, Google has several of them, Twilio has Signal, Track.js has PubConf. I feel it really represents who we are as a company. So it's a lot of fun, but I'm going to show you some of the actual mechanics and numbers behind how we do this. So I'm going to actually get into like the scary number side of marketing here. So full disclosure. Before this, we've talked about the fluffy side of it, of I can't really pin down specifics. It's about, you know, building a brand. Now we're going to talk about the funnel. How many people have heard the funnel at their office, or they work with the funnel? How many of them actually know what it is, and it's not just some abstract concept the marketers throw around occasionally in meetings? So we're going to talk about the funnel. The funnel is an incredibly important part of your overall software architecture. This is how you get users. And whether or not you actually put any thought into it, you have one today. The funnel is this mechanism that you have created, either intentionally or accidentally, on how somebody who might be interested in your product ends up actually being interested in potentially installing it or subscribing or giving you money, depending on what your product is. It's part of your architecture diagram that is a series of steps that your leads are going to take before they turn into customers. They're probably going to land on some part of your web page based on the kind of products you all are likely to build, and go through one or more goals before giving you money. So I'm going to give you some examples from PubConf. So PubConf holds events in a lot of different cities. It's not very likely that somebody who goes to a PubConf in London is actually going to go to a PubConf in Kansas City. There's not that many people who are jet setters like that. So the top of our funnel is that they've landed on one of our event pages. So you've come and you've landed on PubConf KCDC. That's the start of a funnel. And then what I specifically care about in terms of PubConf is first that you view who our speakers are. Because what we found is that once you see who is speaking at PubConf and what they're speaking about, you're far more likely to come. I'm going to show you. Oh, dang it, I don't have it open. pubconf.io/Kansas City. So here is the PubConf Kansas City website. So on the top is like, some pictures of people drinking, and it happened before, so there's some details about it. It's basically once you get down to here and you see who were the people who spoke at PubConf KCDC and what their talks were about. That people start to say, oh, I get it, this is a joke. This is gonna be fun. There were two different talks about how JavaScript can be awful. What's Sean's avatar? Did you notice that? There it goes. All right. Back to this. So I want you to land on an event page. I want you to look at the speakers. Then I want you to look at the tickets and then hopefully buy a ticket. That is the funnel for the PubConf event. So how do you know any of this works? So you have one of these for whatever you're doing right now, whether you've built it intentionally or not. And so you don't really know if it works, like any piece of software, unless you test it. And so how do you test a funnel? You test it with analytics. So the analytics libraries like Google Analytics, Mixpanel, Kissmetrics, Intercom, custom stuff. There's so many pieces of analytics tools. But analytics is your test harness for your funnel. You build analytics and you attach it to the specific parts of your funnel so that you know whether or not they are working. A lot of people will take analytics and just slap it on their page and then call it done. And then they see a fire hose of metrics coming at them and they don't really know what any of it means. Build your analytics and think about them in terms of your funnel. Build specific reports that test each step that you think is in your funnel to see whether or not it is working. That's what I just said. So unlike pieces of software, your analytics tests aren't red and green. They are not clear. You don't get passing tests with your analytics. You get this. And you're like, is that good? I don't know. Is that bad? I don't know if that's good or bad. It's up to you to interpret it because it's all subjective here. So here is some more data from PubConf. Here is the PubConf funnel again. And so I have analytics that test each one of these things. And so here's from a particular data range that happened to align very nicely to a nice round number on the top for easy math. On a particular time frame, I had 1,000 people come in and look at the event page. And of that, 196 looked at the speakers, 140 viewed tickets, and 118 bought tickets. So translating that to conversion rates, here's how that fell through. So 19% of people actually looked at the speakers. But once they did that, it was far more likely for them to fall all the way through. 71% looked at tickets and 84 bought them. So is that good? I don't know. I mean, it's subjective. Overall, my conversion rate is 11.81% about. So from the people who land on the page, about 11% of people end up buying a ticket. Now, I think that that first number is bad. Again, subjectively, I feel like I could do better. I want to try and improve that. I'm going to try and change around that web page a little bit, market it a little bit differently, see if I can make that number go up. But after that, I feel great about that. Like once somebody has actually spent the time and looked at the page, I feel great that I have 71% of people go on to look at buy a ticket. That's great. So let's bring it back out to the funnel again. So we get leads in the top, and some percentage of them will become customers. So if we can somehow figure out how much it costs us to shove a new lead down the top, we can figure out how much money is falling out the bottom. And so if we can put all these numbers together, we could figure out how many dollars can I shove into the top to get even more dollars out the bottom and build a machine that makes money. So how you would typically buy leads to go in the top is a concept called advertising, which I'm sure everybody is familiar with. For most online advertising, we typically measure this in cost per click, but there's lots of different ways to do it. I'm going to focus on just one. PubConf seems to respond very well to advertising on Twitter. There tends to be a lot of developers on Twitter. Twitter's pretty active around conference time, and I can do really great targeting and say, hey, anybody who's talking about the conference that there's a PubConf ad, I want to make sure that they see all kinds of ads for PubConf in their Twitter timeline and creep all over the conference hashtag, and it's really easy to target a conference on Twitter. And so I can buy ads, and I pay for them by how many people click on them. So cost per click. However many times people click on my ad, I will pay for that. And so here is an ad campaign on Twitter for PubConf Kansas City. And what you can see here is there's a bunch of different ads. I ran ads for each speaker individually. And so the numbers are a little small here, but so for example, I could guilt my speakers with actual data and say 126 people clicked on Lindsay Pageant's ad, and 0 people clicked on Damien's ad. So clearly, Lindsay's a better developer than Damien, objectively. But that doesn't matter. That's just fun. What really matters is overall. Overall, my cost per click was $1.17. So the overall campaign meant that for how much money I spent and how effective it was, I would spend $1.17 to get a click to come onto the PubConf website. So I can put that in the funnel. That's how much it cost me to throw a new lead in the top. And then I know from earlier, from my tests, that my funnel itself performs at 11.81%. And so what that tells me is if I put those two numbers together, I can get a number of how much does it actually cost me to acquire a customer. With my current funnel and how much I can pay to acquire one, it costs me about $10 worth of advertising to get one customer to buy a ticket. Now, that's interesting by itself, but it's not enough to go off of, right? What your cost to acquire is going to depend greatly on how much money you're making. Like if you only sell your product for $5 and it costs $10 to acquire them, you probably should not be advertising. That's probably not a good use of your money. So what we need to figure out is what is a customer actually worth to us? And this is a concept called lifetime value. And how you figure this out will depend a lot on how your business is going to work. Like if you're a consultant, your lifetime value of a client is probably really high. It's probably like, what is the average cost that you've billed to your client across all of them? If you're writing a blog, your lifetime value of a customer is probably really, really small. It's how much money do you derive from the ads you place on your page across how many sessions you get or whatever. So the calculation is going to be different for every kind of business. But for PubConf, this is an event. I sell tickets. A ticket costs about $30. And I have enough historical data to know that once you've come to a PubConf, you're 50% of the time going to just buy tickets for every future PubConf in that city. And I don't even have to advertise to you again. I send out a mailing list, say, hey, PubConf's coming back to Kansas City, and all of a sudden 50% of them will have just bought tickets. And that's great. So my lifetime value, I estimate like this, is I'm going to sell a ticket for $30, and there's a 50% chance they're going to buy a ticket again next year. So I think the lifetime value of acquiring that customer is $45. As a quick rule of thumb, the cost to acquire a new customer should be a third or less of how much of the lifetime value you get. As in, if you're spending more than a third of the value of that customer, you're probably losing money. So if I put all of the numbers together for PubConf, $1.17 to get a new lead, 11.81% conversion, about $10 to acquire, but I get $45 of value out of buying that customer. That makes PubConf this awesome little machine that takes $10 bills on the front side and spits out $45 worth of beer out the other. And that's pretty awesome. So that was my third story. kind of recapping them, the 3 stories about me and my different promotion stuff is when I was a consultant, start professional speaking. I offered that to you. I will help you review anything that you'd like to pitch out there. It is one of the most transformative things you can do for your career. Second, once you know what you want to do, you need to start building an audience. There's lots of tools to do it, but you need to create things for your audience and bring it to the places where they are. And then third, once you actually are ready to capitalize on your audience and build your own product or your own career, how do you measure that funnel? How do you actually take that and turn people who are interested in what you do into people who can actually give you the money you need to pay your mortgage and live? This was the Developer's Guide to Promoting Themselves. Thanks very much for coming. I appreciate it. Happy to answer questions afterwards. This isn't mine. Somebody just left it here. Oh, I brought that for the previous speaker, so you can have that if you want. Do you want to take questions, or do you want me to talk about lunch or something? I'll take 5 minutes of questions. Yeah. Well, this is a berry Gatorade. It's about 355 milliliters. I'll put this out for auction. Who's willing to give me $1? Any other questions?
Quick question for you. When you first started out advertising on Twitter, did you said that you figured out that Twitter was a pretty good venue for doing that. When you first started out, I assume your PPC costs were a lot higher because you had narrowed down. How did you go about in the beginning saying, hey, AdWords isn't as good as Twitter versus Instagram or whatever? What was your thought process? Can you walk through a little bit on that?
Sure. Should I repeat it so that it's on film? All right. So the question was, how did I select Twitter as the proper advertising platform for PubConf? And then how did I drive the costs down of that platform? So when I first started, I didn't know. So the first PubConf I advertised on AdWords, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter are all the channels I tried. And you actually have to invest a kind of a non-insignificant amount of money to get a statistical sample. And I probably didn't invest enough, so I don't feel super confident in it. I put $500 into each platform for the first one. And what I found was that Facebook was not effective at all. In general, my opinion is that most tech people kind of avoid Facebook, and even if they go on Facebook, they avoid the ads like incredibly. LinkedIn was mainly filled with recruiters. There weren't a lot of people who actually interacted with LinkedIn ads. And then Google, I got a little bit of traction on, but it was very hit or miss because most people that I was trying to target would be people who are already coming to town for an event. So they were coming into town for KCDC, or they were coming into town for NDC where we'd partnered. And so I wanted to target them, and there wasn't a Google keyword that really correlated nicely with it. Like I tried targeting the conference, like people searching for KCDC, but generally people don't search for it again after they've already bought a ticket. So it wasn't a very strong correlation. When we first did it, I ran through several different iterations of ads. I don't really remember what my numbers were. They weren't that much higher. I think they were probably upwards of like $2 a click until we started dialing in the ads. Having better pictures was good. I always would do an ad campaign with like 10 different variants of pictures, and you'd get a better sense of like what kind of things people click on. Because people don't read text very often. They just click on the pretty pictures. So the prettier the pictures, the better. Yeah. Yep. Sure. So the question is like advice on how to get feedback on being more likely to get selected for conferences. There's not a really great way. So as the conference themselves, typically most conferences get hundreds and hundreds of applicants to fill in their spot, and they have an advisory group of people who are trying to pick the right talks and the right people for the event. And so a lot of times there's not really an ability to get feedback from the advisory group just because they have literally hundreds of people to go through. You can ask, but I've actually never gotten direct feedback. So what I do is I actually gauge the success of a talk, not in terms of like how well I delivered it, but how well the talk conformed to the abstract and the title that I gave it. So the number of people that are in this room at this point in the engagement means that I feel like this talk is pretty right on. There's a lot of people here, there's a lot of people interested, and so people seem to resonate that what I pitched in my abstract was close enough to what I'm talking about now that it mattered. But going to your user group, and if everybody kind of like filters away during your talk or doesn't stay and ask questions, it usually means that your content didn't match what the user or what the audience was expecting. So that's a way to just dial in what your title and abstract is, because that's like the face of it. So sometimes I will come up with like 3 or 4 different variants of a talk with just different wording, and I'll submit them to different conferences. It's the exact same talk, just with a different title, because I want to see how the titles resonate. And then at the beginning of the year, when you're coming up with, or whenever you want to come up with your talks, I might write 10 of them down, 10 different ideas that I think might be interested, but I won't build any of the talks yet. I'll just float them out to the conferences I want to go to. And then based on which ones they talk, or which ones they accept, then I spend the time and I build the talks. Now that can backfire, because I did have a year where I built like 10 talks, and then there wasn't like a consensus. Like usually there's a consensus and all the conferences will pick the same 2 or 3 that are right, but sometimes you'll just get all 10 accepted, and you're like, dang it, now I have to build 10 of them. And you can overwork. So I hope that's an okay answer. It's mainly just about just keep iterating and get a broader sample set. Like for whatever reason, if ThunderPlains doesn't take it, that's okay. Like try other conferences. There are so many conferences. There's a conference every week. If you wanted to like if you had a way to like actually make a living off of speaking at conferences, you could just go from conference to conference to conference. There's 3 conferences happening right now. Like with people who I follow on my Twitter are talking about like Uradev in Malmo is happening right now. Build Stuff in Lithuania is happening right now. There's 2 different conferences in California happening right now. And like, there's so many. So just, blast out what you want to talk about to a bunch of them and see what resonates. Yeah. So on the specific software side, having a co-founder I feel is like one of the best things you can ever have. Especially if you're gonna, we moonlighted the business, so we all had other jobs when we started it. And when you're starting something, it's a very emotional thing. Like you tie yourself up in what you're building, and so it becomes an emotional roller coaster where you'll sign a big customer and you'll feel like, oh, this is awesome, everything's working, and then somebody will say something mean about you on the internet, and it like literally crushes you. Like you're, eating ice cream in front of the TV in your pajamas for 2 days. And if too many bad things happen in a row, like you want to quit. And so your partner needs to bring a couple things to the table. First, they shouldn't think like you. Like if you both agree on everything all the time, one of you isn't necessary. You should have a different perspective on things and hopefully a different skill set to bring to the table. But secondly, they just need to be your emotional support. A lot of people have compared partnerships on a startup to marriage, and it is very much like that. I talk to Eric, my co-founder, just as much as I talk to my wife. Like every day, multiple times a day, we're on chat, something is going on, we're responding to it. And so that emotional support system is very important, where if you were starting something by yourself, I don't feel like I am emotionally strong enough to have not like quit multiple times along the way. So there's another question over there. Absolutely. So this, just to reiterate for the camera, the suggestion was another way to get into conferences is to have like outside proof that you're an expert on the topic, either through a blog or through other documented presentations that the organizers would be familiar with. Cool. Anything else? It's lunchtime then.